This video, I'd like to explore with you the Appalachians of the Holy Land, the central mountain region that contains the ancient tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, what in New Testament times was Samaria. Begin with the review again of the longitudinal zones in the Holy Land. It's always important to keep this in mind. So we always start with the Mediterranean Sea, and then there's the coastal plains, and then there's this central mountain range. Jerusalem is on this central mountain range. We'll see Ephraim and Manasseh on this central mountain range. And remember, there's rain on this side of the mountains, and then on this side of the mountains, there is no rain. Then the Rift Valley, the Jordan River Valley with the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee and the Lake of Hula. And then the Transjordan Mountains, and there's rain again on this side of the mountains, and the rain continues for about 20 miles until we get to the desert. And again, today we'll be looking at the area right in the center of Ephraim and Manasseh. I'd like to begin with just talking about going for a walk. Back in the book of Numbers, God's people were just a day's walk from entering into the promised land. But the nation of Edom would not allow them to travel through their land. And so God had a detour for them to take. Now, this detour adds about 350 miles to their trip. It's to go all the way down to Eilat on the Red Sea, then go out into the desert, around Edom here, around Moab in this area, all the way up then to the Jordan River. And oh, by the way, the Jordan River at that time was at flood stage. This is a picture of the Jordan River in the 1930s. Now the Jordan River is so heavily used for irrigation that you don't see something like this. But back then, it would have been an impassable waterway. I like to compare what God was asking the Israelites to do is for us to travel from Muskego to Milwaukee, but rather than take this walk from Muskego to Milwaukee, let's walk all the way down through Chicago, around Lake Michigan, all the way up to Muskegon, and then we don't have a Lake Ferry Express to take us across the lake. We just have to figure out how to get across this impassable waterway on our own. It is no wonder that God's people griped and complained. You're familiar with the account of the bronze snake and the Israelites complaining about what God was asking them to do. Well, yeah, they're real people just like us. And if you know the map work, you can go, I understand why they complained. God, there is no way, this makes no sense. And over again, God is saying to his people, trust me, trust me. And that's a lesson that we can learn yet to this day. So when they get to the edge of the promised land, Moses is not allowed to enter the promised land. But right at the end of Deuteronomy 34, we read this. Then Moses climbed Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab to the top of Pisgah, across from Jericho. There the Lord showed him the whole land, from Gilead to Dan, all of Naphtali, the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the Mediterranean Sea, the Negev, and the whole region from the valley of Jericho, the city of palms, as far as Zoar. If you're ever able to go to Jordan, this is part of our planned trip next year, God willing. We'll be at the top of Mount Nebo, and on the top of Mount Nebo, it's usually hazy, so you can't see that well, but you'll see a sign like this that tells you, Lake Tiberias, the Sea of Galilee. It's about 60 miles straight to the north. Nablus or Shechem is what it's called in the Bible, and that's about uh, about 70. Let me see. 66 times 6 is 30, about 40 miles away. You can see that Jerusalem is closer, maybe about 30 miles away, straight to the west, and so on. You can see that the country is very small. So God allowed Moses to see the country, but he was never able to enter it. This is the area that we will be studying. So he was down here right at the southern, the bottom edge of this map, and he was looking all the way north to the Sea of Galilee, up to Naphtali, way up here. So Mount Nebo is about 3,000 feet high. The Dead Sea is about 1,300 feet below sea level, so 4,000-foot drop. So he could have looked up the river valley of the Jordan all the way to the Sea of Galilee, seen this area, seen the mountains of Galilee, and then seen the central highlands of Manasseh and Ephraim right in this area. This is what we'll be looking at today. I call them the Appalachians of the Holy Land because I think that gives you a better understanding of the kind of mountains these are. These aren't rocky mountains. They're about the same height as the Appalachians in the United States. About 2 to 3,000 feet high is what most of them are. When the Israelites came to the edge of the promised land, they were in Abel Shittim, and they crossed over to Gilgal, crossing the Jordan River. Remember, the Jordan River dries up. God causes the Jordan River to dry up under uh, uh, Joshua, just like the Red Sea dried up under Moses. They cross over from Shittim to Gilgal. It's something that's mentioned in Micah chapter 6. Remember the travel from Shittim to Gilgal. Remember how God could do the impossible. This is what we want to do as we think about Old Testament history, seeing how God over and over again has done the impossible, and calling upon God's people to trust him. And that's certainly brought out when we see this map work. So here is our estimate of where Gilgal is. We don't know exactly where it is, but it wasn't far from Jericho. And after they cross the Jordan River, what does God want them to do? Oh, he wants them to get circumcised. For the last 40 years, they've been on the move, and so they haven't circumcised their children. And so they're only a little ways away from the enemy. There's no natural barrier. And God says, incapacitate yourself for a couple of weeks, have all the men circumcised. And you're going, this makes no sense. And God's saying over and over again, trust me, trust me, trust me, that our God can deliver his people. And then it goes on and reminds us that Jericho is captured by the Israelites going around the city of Jericho 7 days in a row. The seventh day, they go around 7 times, and the walls come tumbling down. This map also shows some of the other places that we're going to look at. We're going to look at Shiloh, and we're also going to look at Shechem up in this central mountain region. And you can kind of see this path. This is what I would call the Blue Ridge Parkway of the Holy Land. This is the the trade route that kind of travels right at the top of the central mountain ridge. I like to talk about the irony of the Appalachians of the Holy Land because the area that we're looking at today is not really part of Israel today. It is part of what is called the West Bank. And I just thought I'd spend just a few moments explaining the West Bank and how this all came about. So this is the West Bank in Israel. It is about the size of Delaware in our country. It is kind of this half of a butterfly with this area coming in to reach all the way to the Jerusalem. Back in 1948, when Israel was established as a nation by the UN, the Arab countries all attacked this new little nation of Israel. And most of the People thought that Israel would very quickly be wiped out by these surrounding Arab nations. Many of the Palestinians, as the fighting drew closer, fled from the Israeli forces, fleeing into safer Palestinian areas, just assuming that once Israel was defeated, then they could go back home. And the fact of the matter is, Israel won that war in 1948, and the Palestinians were not allowed to go back home, and that's why we talk about Palestinian refugees to this day. This is almost, let me see, 80 years later, and they are still wanting to go back to the homelands that they left behind when Israel captured or became an existing nation. The irony is, this is the area of Palestine that is occupied by the Palestinians, and then down here is the Gaza Strip, and these are areas that the ancient Israelites could control. They couldn't control the plains. So it's just this irony that the location of the Israelites in the Bible times and the Israelis today are kind of exchanged. You see, back in Bible times, this is mountainous, and the Israelites didn't have horses and chariots. Horses and chariots do very well on the plains. They're the ancient battle tanks. So they couldn't control the plains, but they could control the mountains. Today, the Israelis took the best part of the land. That's where most of the Jews lived, moved into the Holy Land in the early 1900s, and that's where their property is today. Now, here's the West Bank. Again, it's about the size of Delaware. And when you travel to Israel, you will be able to travel up here in Galilee. And then what we've done in the past is we've traveled along the Jordan River. And you'll see as you travel through the Jordan River Valley that it is a very lush agricultural area today because of the irrigation. It wasn't that way in the past, but irrigation has allowed much of this place to be farmed. Here's another interesting fact that the Palestinians control actually very little of the whole West Bank. Most of it is under Israeli control. And what Israel did is back in the early 2000s, there had been an uprising by the Palestinians, and there was terrorist attacks from the Palestinian area in the West Bank over to Israel. And so they built a wall around the West Bank. So as you go through Israel, you will see a wall like this that cuts through the country, very high and very impregnable, to protect the Israelis from the Palestinians. But you can understand why the Palestinians resent the presence of this wall and this separation. Here's the wall in Bethlehem. It is a pretty stark contrast. You are in Israel, and then you cross over into the West Bank to visit Jerusalem, or to visit Bethlehem, and you see this very imposing wall. So this area that was controlled by the Israelites in the Old Testament times now is Palestinian area. And because it is in the West Bank, I'm talking to you about areas that I've never really gotten to visit very much, because most of the time it is not safe to travel in the West Bank. We just won't go there. You might be able to go to Jericho, and that's on our itinerary. Ancient Jericho was the first walled city. It is a classic example of ancient history. That those on the outside, those in the desert areas, wanted to get into the more fertile areas, and those on the inside, those in the fertile parts of the world, were trying to keep the nomad tribes out. So the ins trying to keep the outs out, and the outs trying to get in. And Jericho, thousands of years before the biblical times, was a walled city because it was the first fortress to try to keep the nomadic tribes out and to preserve the the wealth of this cultivated area. Today, the tell or the hill of Jericho is about half the size of our church campus. Our church campus is 29 acres. It's about 15 acres. And you can see that this is the area that's excavated. A lot of it's not excavated. This is just a fact of life, is that you can't possibly excavate everything. You archaeologists choose what they think is the most likely area and then excavate that. So I've never seen these ruins. I hope to be able to see them someday, hopefully this next January. And there's a lot of controversy about Jericho. Back in the 1950s and 60s, Kathleen Kenyon, an archaeologist, said, I've done the research, and archaeology does not prove, it disproves the biblical account. Other archaeologists look at the same data and say, no, it does prove the biblical account. What they're doing is they're dating different layers. There's no disagreement that there are some destruction layers in Jericho. The question is, what was the time of that destruction? And there can be differences of opinion among archaeologists. But I think the strongest argument to reassure us that what we're seeing really is the ancient Jericho that testifies to the destruction of the city by Joshua and the Israelites is the fact that there were jars filled with grain that were charred in the fire but left there. You see, if you were capturing a city back in the old days, you would not just burn everything up. You would take everything of value out of the city before you burned it. You would have taken all of that grain because that's money. You don't want to burn money. So you would take it out and then destroy the city. But remember, in the book of Joshua, Jericho is completely dedicated to the Lord. They are not to take anything out of it. They're just to burn it all. And so the very evidence of grain in jars like this that are left there in the midst of the destruction is a testimony to the reliability of the biblical account. But again, I wouldn't put too much pressure or too much stock in archaeologists' claims, because you will find other archaeologists who disagree with them. So our confidence in the scriptures is really based on God's word, not on archaeological evidence. From Jericho, we'll go up to Shiloh. Shiloh is where the tabernacle was first set up in the Holy Land. I'll go to Shechem, I'm sorry, to Shechem first. So we go way up north here to Shechem. Shechem is kind of the belly button of the Promised Land. And at Shechem, they were to pronounce blessings from Mount Gerizim and curses from Mount Ebal. And the city of Shechem is right in the middle between these two mountains. Both mountains are about 3,000 feet high. And Shechem means shoulder in Hebrew. So you can kind of see that these mountains kind of look like shoulders. Today, Shechem is called Nablus. If you hear references to Nablus, it is ancient Shechem. And interestingly enough, Jesus met the woman at the well of Sychar. Sychar is probably in this area right here, and she referenced worshiping the Samaritans worship on Mount Gerizim. She could have just pointed and said, there it is. So I've never seen Shechem. I hope to see it someday soon. And now we go to Shiloh. Shiloh is where the tabernacle was first set up. It is another large tell, about 40 acres, so about half again the size of our campus. And this was destroyed by the Philistines right at the end of the time of the judges. That's how First Samuel begins. the Philistines are fighting, and ultimately they come and destroy Shiloh and take the Ark of the Covenant into captivity. The nation is divided right after the time of King Solomon, and the northern nation is called Israel. And Tirzah becomes the capital of the northern nation. So here's Shechem. Here's that main route, the trade route that kind of travels right at the top of the mountain pass, or the mountains, central mountains. And Tirzah then was the first capital set up by Jeroboam, son of Nebat. And here is a picture of the tell. And this is a great picture. You can see where the archaeologists have done their work, but the rest of the tell is farmed. Uh, it's not like you can possibly excavate the entire tell. That would just be too mammoth an undertaking. So they look for a promising area, and they very carefully dig down to determine where things are at the exact space so that 15 years from now, another uh, archaeologist can look at the findings and know exactly where a piece of potsherd was found or something like that. Under the time of Omri and Ahab, the capital is moved to Samaria. So it's moved off of the main north route a little bit to the west, uh, perhaps to move it just a little bit closer to what is today Lebanon, Phoenicia, Tyre, and Sidon, Baal, uh, uh, sorry, um, Omri and his son Ahab allied themselves with Tyre and Sidon. uh, Ahab marries a princess of Tyre and Sidon, Jezebel. So there's this strong tie. So perhaps that's why it's moved to Samaria. Samaria is another large tell. It was an easily defended spot. That also might be part of the reason is be more defensible. Defensible. Omri and Ahab were some of the strongest kings of the northern nation of Israel. The the northern nation of Israel becomes its largest and strongest under Jeroboam II, one of the descendants of Omri and Ahab. By the way, Ahab is the king during the time of the prophet Elijah, Elijah and the prophets of Baal. So very powerful, and Elijah speaking to one of the most powerful men in ancient Israel when he calls Ahab to repentance. So you'll be able to see some of the ruins from Ahab and Omri's time. Uh, the city was also rebuilt by the Romans, and it was called Sebasti, which is the Greek for Augustus, so called after the Caesar. So you'll see Roman ruins there. And you'll also see uh, the ruins of a temple to the pagan gods built by Herod, the same Herod that built the temple in Jerusalem to the Lord our God. It's just amazing. Herod was an incredible builder. He spent money building buildings all over the Holy Land, but it was he was not a godly man. He just built the temple because this was a good way to curry favor with the Jews. And then this part of Israel's geography closes with the captivity. The Assyrians take the leaders, the prominent people from the area of Samaria that we are studying, and takes them off into exile. It's a very wise thing that these kings did. They would take some of the the ruling parties, those that they didn't kill, they would take off into exile. They would give them property and say, "You own this property because I'm the king of Assyria." And in a sense, they buy the loyalty because if the king of Syria is dethroned, guess what? The original owners want that property back. So you better want the king of Assyria to stay in power. And then the same thing, there are people from this area that are taken back to Samaria and given land by the king of Assyria. And you can imagine that the people in the local people, if the king of Assyria weren't there, they would try to take that land back. So you're buying loyalty from people. So it becomes a mixed race area. This is why the Jews of Jesus' day didn't go through Samaria, and why it's so remarkable that Jesus visits this woman at the well of Sychar. And then the last thing, we see the Assyrian advance on the fortress Judah. Next week, we'll look at fortress Judah, the tribe of Judah, and how God gave this area that was the best protected as a place where the Davidic kings could prosper and the promise of the Savior could continue to exist. But in Isaiah chapter 10, it's just interesting. The Assyrians advance, they capture Samaria, and they want to take Jerusalem too. And it just talks about how there's this advance of the Assyrian army to Beth Aven and Aath and Migron and Michmash and Ramah and Gibeah and all the way to Nob. Nob is like a mile and a half away. And think of Nob kind of like the here in Muskego, the hill just north of our church in New Berlin. You can see the city from there. It's only about a mile away, but that's as far as God will allow the Assyrians to advance. The Israelite king, or the king of Judah, would be humbled. The stump of Jesse, they would be humbled, but they would continue to exist, and the nation would continue to exist for about another 140 years. So next week, we will take a look at Fortress Judah. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. God bless.